Boston Mayor Marty Walsh announced today the Boston Marathon is officially canceled for the year. Not exactly a surprise to most at this point, but still a great disappointment for many runners and spectators. And as everyone knows, the headlines have been almost entirely dominated by coronavirus for months now. But a few important stories have managed to break through, like the death of George Floyd, an unarmed black man, which has some city officials where he was killed calling for racism to be declared a public health emergency. Protesters in Minneapolis turned out for a second straight night, and as police shot tear gas and rubber bullets, some in the crowd got violent, looting and setting fires that burned into the morning. At least one man was shot and killed in the chaos, and while there's a suspect in custody in that incident, no charges have been filed in the case of an unarmed black man, seen here, handcuffed, pleading for his life, as a white police officer kneels on his neck for more than 5 minutes.
I can't breathe, officer.
All 4 officers involved in the death of George Floyd were quickly fired, but his family says that's nowhere near enough.
We need justice. Yeah. Those 4 officers need to be arrested. They executed my brother in broad daylight. People had to film that. People had to see that. People pleaded for his life.
Floyd's death is just the latest in a series of startling episodes showing indifference to black life in America, all caught on video, starting with the shooting death of a 24-year-old unarmed jogger named Ahmaud Arbery. It happened in February, but it wasn't until the video came out 6 weeks later that 3 men were ultimately arrested and charged with Arbery's murder. Then this week, this hard-to-fathom exchange between a young white woman and a black bird watcher.
Sorry, I'm asking you to stop.
According to the birder, Christian Cooper, it started when he asked Amy Cooper to put her dog on a leash as park rules required. When she refused, he says things escalated, so he took out his phone.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to me.
And I'm taking a picture and calling the cops.
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
I'm sorry, I'm in a ramble, and there is a man, African-American, he has a bicycle helmet. He is recording me and threatening me and my dog.
That video has been viewed more than 40 million times, and Christian Cooper says that's because it speaks to a larger problem.
Sadly, I think there were assumptions made about black people, and that goes beyond this one woman. That's a societal issue.
I'm joined now by Jabari Asim, a former editor at The Washington Post, now an associate professor of writing at Emerson College, and author of We Can't Breathe on Black Lives, White Lives, and the Art of Survival. Welcome, Jabari. Welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, Emily.
You know, watching those videos and listening to the heartbreaking comments from George Floyd's brother. I mean, he speaks for all of us saying, we all stood there and watched him die, us, being distant after it happened. But as horrible as those were, I mean, what was your instant reaction? Did it shock you, or was it like, no, this is the way it is?
Well, I think, like a lot of African Americans, I have 2 different reactions. One is I don't want to see this. I've been exposed to enough trauma, firsthand, secondhand, there's no need. But on the other hand, I feel, as a writer, I feel a need to bear witness, to be a recorder of deeds. And I think I have to pay attention and get the details. But it's emotionally wrenching no matter what the impulse is, no matter what you're thinking about. It's grueling.
The police chief fired these 4 officers instantly, and one had been involved in an incident back in 2014 that was somewhat similar. And the mayor called it flat-out racism. So, I mean, there is such a thing as due process, and they will likely be arrested. But the protesters want it right away. And, I mean, the fact that they took some instantaneous action, isn't that somewhat positive or comforting?
Well, the protesters are responding to the death of Jamar Clark in similar circumstances, followed by Philando Castile. This is the same metropolitan community. So this is sort of like the third strike as far as they're concerned. The policeman responsible for the death of Philando Castile was fired, but was not convicted.
He was the one, we should just say, he was the one who was out with his girlfriend, and he got pulled over for and he kept saying he wasn't armed, and he was putting his hands up, and the guy just got really nervous and shot him to death. Yeah.
Yes, he was licensed to carry.
Yeah.
He told the policeman, I have a firearm. I'm
Right.
licensed to carry it. And Philando's girlfriend filmed the exchange,
Yes,
and we saw him die on Facebook Live. So that was the second strike in the Minneapolis area. And so George Floyd is like strike 3, and people are understandably fed up.
Yeah. That incident involved the police, as many of these have. The one with Ahmaud Arbery and Amy Cooper did not until after the fact. I'm really curious about your take on Amy Cooper. I was saying, not that we're a nerd to these other things, but, there's this vigilanteism, as in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, or cops just brute force. But this was like this unprovoked, the guy seemed to be having a sane conversation with her, and she went nutso on the racial thing. I found that one shocking.
Yeah, I have a couple of responses to it. I think that Amy Cooper was very aware of what happens to black men in encounters with police. I think she was completely informed there and knew exactly what she was doing. The second thing that I find significant or distinctive is that those of us who consider ourselves liberal or progressive, we want to write off those kind of responses as right-wing or Republican or, oh, she's a Trump voter. It's really easy to do that. But she self-identifies as a liberal Democrat who contributed to Obama campaigns and other Democratic campaigns. So I thought it was illuminating in that respect that we can't always attribute or blame racist behavior on someone's perceived politics. Racism goes across the board.
So you were saying she was sort of establishing her superiority in the caste of Americans. Hey, I may be a white woman, a white man may be one step above me, but I'm one step above you because I'm a white woman and you're a black man, and basically threatening him with. Well, I'm sure he was filled with dread, even though he reacted very coolly, that she was going to call the cops on him, because as soon as she starts saying something, they don't know what happened.
Yeah, and I think she was saying, I have a right to this space, and you don't.
Yeah, exactly. And now, back to the Ahmaud Arbery one for a second. That's another incident where it took 6 weeks for anything to happen. And interestingly, in the George Floyd thing, the police did the same thing. They completely changed the set of circumstances and the events. So, for instance, they never mentioned that there was somebody kneeling on his neck. They never mentioned that. In this case with Ahmaud Arbery, they never mentioned beforehand that at least 3 people were involved in this chase. They never mentioned the fact that there was video involved. Of course they knew that.
Yeah, but police reports, incident reports are often as fictional as best-selling novels.
God, that's depressing.
They're very creative. The same thing happened in the Breonna Taylor case when she was killed in Louisville in March. The original narrative was the police were raiding the home of her boyfriend where she was, and that he was a criminal.
Yes.
It was a no-knock warrant. They were at the wrong address. They shot her 8 times. But the initial report suggested, there almost was an implication that she deserved.
Had provoked them, yeah.
Yes.
And how about the one, the woman who was pulled over, some minor traffic infraction? She had her tail light was out or something, and they end up throwing her to the ground, hauling her off to jail. She dies in jail.
Sandra Bland.
Sandra will never know the exact circumstances of why she died.
And what was significant in that one is that when the encounter gets particularly combative, the policeman made sure to drag her out of range of his camera.
Yeah, and you can hear the tension in their voice in all of these cases, except for the one with George Floyd. I'm wondering, where is this going? Are people more aware? After Ferguson, we thought, oh well, that was a one-off. Cops were overreacting to the fact that he had allegedly robbed a store and maybe roughed up that was a one-off. But these are not one-offs.
Yeah, the fact is police kill between 900 and 1,000 civilians every year. This year, they've already killed 400. That's according to the Washington Post. These killings. That doesn't include killings like George Floyd because it wasn't a shooting. So they are on pace to match previous years, despite there being a pandemic and this being relatively clear. So I think people are in a position where we've talked about reform for a long time. Reform has perhaps become too mild a word when we're talking about what we need to do.
By the way, Jabari, do you think Amy Cooper should be charged with a crime?
I do. I think there should be consequences for her actions. I think it would be significant for her, but also significant for other people who are so quick to threaten to call 911 on Black people when they think they're in the wrong place and have no right to.
I mean, it was a false alarm, too, so she should be charged with that.
Absolutely.
All right. Jabari Asim, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Emily. Take care.